Well, let's talk about what's happening in New York City right now, because it's not just some local election sideshow. It's a five-alarm fire, screaming warning for every single American who cares about this country's future. This isn't just politics, my friends. This is a full frontal assault on the very soul of our nation, and it's being led by a man named Zohran Mamdani, the poster child for everything that's gone wrong in this once great city. This man, this avowed socialist Democrat, is not just some random candidate. No, he's the product of a deliberate, decades-long scheme to dismantle the cultural and economic foundations of New York City and, by extension, America herself. His rise to power, his grip on the Democratic mayoral primary, is a direct result of open border madness, mass immigration policies, and a radical leftist machine that's been churning out ideologues who despise free enterprise. They sneer at the private sector, and they want to shove big government's boot on the neck of every hardworking American. So let's talk about the polls in New York City, because they're screaming the truth, unfortunately. Quinnipiac, New York Times, Siena, Emerson, they're all sounding the same socialist alarm. Mamdani's leading. 46% here, 43% there. Andrew Cuomo, the establishment golden boy, he's floundering like a fish out of water. Curtis Sliwa, the Republican, well, he's a footnote, barely registering. These aren't just numbers, folks. These are the battle scars of a city whose values have been eroded, chipped away year after year by reckless, perilous immigration policies that started way back in 1965 with the Immigration and Nationality Act. That was the moment the floodgates opened, unleashing a tidal wave of newcomers pouring into our cities, reshaping neighborhoods, and straining public resources to the breaking point. By the 1980s, the census laid it bare. 860,000 new arrivals in a single decade. Non-Hispanic whites, the backbone of New York cultural fabric, pushed below majority status. Communities fractured, cohesion shattered, and it didn't stop there. By the 2010s, African immigration doubled, permanently altering the city's racial and cultural landscape. And into this chaos, this engineered mess, steps Zohran Mamdani. Born in Uganda, Indian parents, didn't even become a U.S. citizen until he had been here 2 decades. 2 decades, folks. That's what happens when you let lax naturalization policies run wild. You get newcomers wielding massive political influence before they've even fully assimilated. And then 2022, Biden, boom, over 210,000 asylum seekers flood New York City, overwhelming shelters, crushing services, creating a volatile electorate that's ripe for socialist dogma. Mamdani's triumph in the Democratic primary this past June, no accident. It was fueled by immigrant and minority voters in Queens and Brooklyn, a coalition built on the wreckage of decades of Democratic upheaval. He didn't just win, he obliterated the establishment, seizing the path to citywide power. But don't be fooled. This isn't just one guy pulling an upset. This is the culmination of years of deliberate political engineering. Policies that lured out-of-state progressives to flood New York's nonprofit sector, infiltrate public agencies, and reshape the electorate into a machine that cares more about leftist crusades than economic vitality. Bill de Blasio, remember him? Well, it was his 2013 election that cracked the door wide open. His social welfare programs like universal pre-K acted like a magnet, pulling in young progressives from red states, creating echo chambers of activism over entrepreneurship. By 2018, his policies had turned city government and nonprofits into breeding grounds for radicalism. And Mamdani, he's the fruit of that poison tree. His primary win was turbocharged by this army of nonprofit warriors and public sector zealots loyal to socialist ideals over fiscal prudence, blind to the realities of long-term New Yorkers. So what's he proposing? Policies that threaten the very foundations of the city. He wants to jack up property taxes on richer and whiter neighborhoods. You heard that right. This isn't just policy. This is anti-white hatred, plain and simple. It'll collapse the housing market. He wants free city buses costing, as we told you, $700 million a year, turning public transit into basically homeless shelters. He's pushing government-run grocery stores to undercut private markets. These are socialist experiments, folks, ripped from the playbook of failed regimes, replacing market incentives with politically driven redistribution. Let's talk about his foreign policy, because it's a disgrace. He refuses to affirm Israel's right to even exist as a Jewish state, calls it an apartheid state. He won't denounce Hamas. He's defended globalized the Intifada, demands aligning himself with a dangerous movement surrounded by communist activists and Soros-funded anti-Israel radicals. He's not just anti-Western, he's anti-American, rejecting the very values that made the country great. What's the economic fallout, you ask? Catastrophic, as Mayor Mamdani would control the New York City Banking Commission with his grip on Wall Street, the engine of global finance, handling trillions in daily trades, $2 trillion in assets, 15% of national commercial loans. Think about that. His plan: redirect $100 billion in city deposits to equity-focused lending, impose equity audits, fee caps, a so-called banking bill of rights. Folks, this will cripple banks holding 42% of U.S. deposits. It'll drive up fees, tighten credit, and spark capital flight. Small businesses, family borrowing, retirement accounts, community lenders, all at risk, not just in New York, but nationwide. This is the legacy of mass immigration and leftist infiltration. Mamdani's rise is the story of a city transformed by third world immigration and homegrown leftism, a narrative of displacement where traditional New Yorkers are pushed out, neighborhoods reshaped, and economic institutions stressed by redistribution over productivity. His ascent is no fluke. It's the predictable result of demographic and political engineering that elevates immigrant votes and leftist fervor over the interests of families and private enterprises. Mamdani is a walking threat to property rights, economic stability, public safety, and yes, he's got venomous designs for whites and Jews, even as some cheer their own demise. His policies will ripple across the nation, fueling radicalism, stoking prejudice, and destabilizing the institutions that keep us prosperous. For every American who believes in strong borders, stable communities, and thriving private enterprise, this is a wake-up call. New York City's election is a referendum on the future of the city and the health of American civic life itself. The stakes could not be higher. We're fighting for the soul of this nation, and it must start here, right now, in New York City. And that's tonight's first word.